there are several risks to exerting your body to this extreme. However, there are also precautions that are taken that reduce that risk significantly that have not been taken historically by CrossFit. And that is where the focus and the problem has been. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey.
Welcome back, Kelsey. I see you didn't have any spills today. You got to cover.
I got to cover. I think this is just the life for me, is just things with covers. I have to tell you guys, we did a podcast with a super awesome guest. If you haven't listened, well, her episode will be coming out. But prior to the podcast, I had my camera off, but my mic was on. And I spilled 2 full glasses of water. So all you heard was like, smash, smash, oh, fuck. And I was like, oh, good thing no one heard that. And then I came on and she's like, oh, how is the spill? And I was like,
the thing is, she was like a super zen.
Yeah.
Like her whole philosophy is like super Eastern and like yogic and like, and your first introduction was spilling a bunch of drinks with no video, just sound, and being like, fuck. And I think it was appropriate. It was an appropriate introduction because then when she did your dosha, she was like, well, I know what you are. I don't even have to know I didn't even need the camera. Which was like your I don't want to say personality type because I'm an idiot and I'm a Western idiot over here. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
we just try to like put it into a language where we understand.
That's my understand is like your personality type. But when you said to me later, I said like, oh, we forgot to record the commercial for that episode, and you were like, well, in my defense, the great spill of 2024. And I said back to you, you can't call it the great spill of 2024 if it's not the first or the last spill of 2024.
Or even the worst, because, all right, so last night, Matt went around, my partner's name is Matt, but he went around and said, I can see where the coffee spill happened, because in the cabinets, so I mean, like when you open some of the like bottom cabinets, it had spilled and gotten on top of like the inside of those, and I was like, man, I'm just such a disaster sometimes.
Well, there's some good things too that come with you, but yeah, I mean,
well, he saw this meme that was like, so there's 2 types of people. I'm sure you guys have all seen these, like 2 types of people. One that opens all the cabinets and one that goes around and closes all the cabinets. And this cycle continues for the rest of their lives. And they find each other and this cycle continues for the rest of their lives.
They always find each other and for some reason definitely just like want to spend the rest of eternity with each other. And it's like, maybe I should have found another cabinet closer instead. That would have been, but no,
because then what would the cabinet opener do? Find another cabinet opener? We'd live in a constant poltergeist situation where like all the cabinets were just always open and no one would be going around closing them. But sometimes I'm just trying to find things.
No, it was Sixth Sense. It was the Sixth Sense. Remember when he came in and he's like, yeah. What? And the mother's like, what are you looking for? Because all the is that what you're thinking of?
Yes, yeah. Where it's some type of like ghost. It sticks in my head of like the other side, and they had opened all the cabinets, and it's just like what had happened?
That is the cabinet closer's life, though. You understand that, right?
Yeah.
Every time we walk in, we're like, were you looking for something? You've gone on to another room now.
Well, that's really what the thing is that at one point, yes, I was looking for something, but I've gone on to something else. They have this great video for anyone who has ADHD. It happens in a movie, and it just like is a perfect depiction of like, oh, I was going to change the light bulb, then I went in and I opened the door, realized that door was squeaky, so I went to get some WD-40. But when I went to get the WD-40, I saw the paint and realized I should probably paint that thing. So like you're 5 steps away from like the initial thing, and then when someone asks you about the first thing, you're like, I'm trying to get there. Like,
I'm working my way back.
like I've been trying, I've been working on something for an hour and a half.
Those cabinets. Oh, yeah. That's right. Well, we stay loving you. We do. And we just assume most of the time that either a ghost has entered the chat, or that once again you were just looking for something and
Forgot.
close these back up. There's
Man.
coffee in this one for some reason.
That's his life right
And
now.
there's
Coffee.
spilled coffee. This smells like not today. Well, you're doing your best.
Everybody's got their things though. Here's what I want everyone to remember in this life is that like everyone has their things. If you go around in this life and you think you don't have your things that are going to annoy another person, you're living a delusional life. You have them. Like they happen, and what we really just try to do is not go around pointing out everyone's flaws. Or, if you are a person who has lived with this life for a long time, you learn to really just laugh at it. Oops, that's part of me. Can't change it now. That's a part of me.
I would rather go around and close the cabinets my whole entire life every day than not know somebody like you. So,
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate closed cabinets, man.
Well, and I hope you also appreciate the fact that, when you come back, they're closed, because that's unsettling.
Yeah.
So,
I would be like, what happened here?
You happened again.
Weird.
So we've got a real somber topic for you guys today, and the need to do this episode, I think, is we've been a part of this community for a very, very long time now. Being that, I've been at numerous regionals, CrossFit events. I've been to the games. I've been a part of, the CrossFit community. I'm in my garage now doing TTSL, but all of my beginnings in fitness were with CrossFit. And you're still a member of an affiliate and have been to multiple high-level competitions, Wadapalooza, regionals. These are, these are our people. This is our community. And the tragedy of the 2024 games is just, it's definitely weighing on the community very heavily. And as members of that community, we really wanted to address it and give some space for people to learn about what happened if you don't know, to some space for just like feelings to be released, and some space to decide how we want to move forward as a community, because we all kind of feel a part of what happened at the games.
For sure. When I had started thinking about the tragedy at the games, first of all, for those of you who don't know, at the CrossFit Games this year, followed by a 3.5-mile run, one of the athletes, Lazar Dukic, drowned approximately 100 meters from the finish line. He was 28 years old. Lazar has been to the CrossFit Games several times. He's a longtime athlete, member of the community, and his death not only was an extremely tragic one, but brought up a lot of feelings for the safety of the athletes at the games, and feelings from the community for the loss, and just questions for headquarters, HQ, about what was going to be done. And following his death, that was on the first day of the CrossFit Games. Following his death, several athletes decided to drop out of the competition. Several athletes, a lot of athletes decided to continue. We'll talk about the decisions that was made or how it, HQ responded, how athletes responded. But I think that the initial thing for me is just that the CrossFit community is such a tight knit community. And when a loss like this happens, it's not it's not the same as what I have witnessed in other sports where, and we'll talk about this a little bit, of like triathlon athletes dying in a race or marathon runners. It's really not the same because the CrossFit community is such a tight knit community, and a lot of these athletes have competed together at the games for years. And had pictures with Lazar, and have just it was felt, it shook every one of the athletes on the floor and the entire community, wondering what was going to be done, what were the athletes going to be doing, criticizing some of the athletes whether they decided to drop out or continue to compete. And I think that the just unique nature of that is because it is such a tight-knit community, we have the ability to voice our opinions and criticize um, not only HQ but athletes, because we're in such a tight-knit community, where in other sports that really just wouldn't be the case. And I just thought this was like an important topic to talk about overall, because I think that not only do we want to focus on the tragedy at the games, but there's been a lot of discussion surrounding sports and safety of sports and what is valid concerns, and when athletes have decided to step aside, thinking about the Olympics and Simone Biles taking time off for her mental health. That was criticized by many and applauded by many. But the whole discussion surrounding athletes and safety and the decisions that they make, whether to continue to compete or not or decide to drop out of competition, is a very personal one, and one that we just kind of criticize very loudly from the sidelines. And I think it's just worth a discussion, the whole thing.
The whole thing is certainly worth a discussion. We had numerous members of our committee or our community who witnessed this live, who were at this event at the games. We know people that were there. Press was there. Athletes that had competed together for years. His brother was competing in this games with him. His family was watching this happen. So this just hit so close to home, because this wasn't, first of all, I just want to say this is a very accomplished swimmer. Okay, this is a former water polo player. I know that when this first came out, there was a lot of questions surrounding, should CrossFitters, be in the water? Because it's like, these are big weightlifting guys, and maybe they, they get into the water and they sink like a rock, and maybe this is just not an appropriate thing for this sport. And the fact is this was a very, very accomplished swimmer. And a highly accomplished CrossFit athlete. This is a person at the pinnacle of their fitness, drowning 100 meters from the finish line. So this is not a situation where, someone gets a leg cramp and goes down. This is not a amateur athlete being, a poorly trained swimmer and hopping in for a triathlon and, not making it, in an open water swim. This is a very unique situation. And the other thing that I think really needs to be spoken about when we discuss the events that happened that day is that spectators watched him struggle for minutes with no assistance. And there was even spectator there was a spectator who literally jumped into the water because he saw him struggling, jumped into the water and like was swimming towards him and swimming at there were lifeguards on paddle boards nearby, screaming that he was in trouble. There was people screaming from the docks that there was someone drowning, that he was missing, that he had, because he was very um he got into the water a little bit after I think he got into the water in sixth place. So he got into the water after some of the athletes. First, there was the run. So it was a 3.5 mile run. And then they were going to swim 800 meters to finish the WOD. And he got into the water in sixth and then was in second, 100 meters from the finish line. So this wasn't a situation where he was coming in way behind the pack or there was a huge amount of swimmers in at that time. There were people everywhere watching this go down, and there were spectators giving, their speaking to reporters after saying, I saw this happen and I'm screaming, but no one's reacting. And I started to think maybe I didn't see what I saw, because
Yeah.
this is a mob mentality situation where there's so many people, we're all watching someone struggle and go down in the water, and we're all looking around going, is anyone else seeing this? Did I see that wrong? And you know there was these paddleboard lifeguards very, very close to where he drowned. And you know once it was realized that he was missing and had not come in, the fire department was called, which led a lot of people to the obvious question of why wasn't the fire department on hand already? The fire department's called. His body is not recovered from the lake until 10 a.m. This is just a situation where this is a great swimmer. This is being watched by hundreds, if not 1,000 people. There are lifeguards in the water. Why is this happening? And I guess for me, this is just an emotional immaturity thing on my end, and I'm working on this, and it's just part of my personality flaws. I immediately react to tragedy with anger. I react to most things with a knee jerk of anger. I'm an 8. That's where I go. And I realize the problems associated with that, because it's not leaving room for grief, and it's not and it goes immediately to blame, right? And I know this about myself, and I want to be careful with how much I'm willing to go off on that tangent and not respect the fact that there are tragic things that people die every day in very tragic ways. Like, for me, I guess where I get extra angry is when I think something is preventable. And that's where I keep getting hung up on this, is why is this happening in front of so many people and there is not an appropriate response? There is not an appropriate team. There is reports that the lifeguards on the paddle boards did not have appropriate flotation devices. They were just on paddle boards with paddle. Like, they did not have. Now, everybody who has ever taken any water safety knows you don't hop in and try to save a drowning person without a flotation device, because they will absolutely bring you down in their own panic. Why were these people not equipped correctly? Why were they not noticing this when there were fans screaming, literally jumping into the water to try to save him? And why is the fire department being called after the fact and they're not on site to administer immediate reactionary? I
Mm.
just,
Life-saving essentially life-saving treatment that is just available right there. And honestly, I think these two things can exist simultaneously, where we can say this was a really tragedy that is one of those things where it's just like, wow, that is such a horrible thing that has happened. And also at the same time say there is so many ways that this could have, that I don't even want to say prevented. Prevented, yes, but just appropriate precautions being taken for athletes' safety. And I think that's what has come to mainstream. That's where all the discussion and eyes have been on, because other game athletes have said, we have been saying this for years. We have been saying that athlete safety is not the first priority of the games. Maybe second, probably more like third. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the first priority. And I think that when we look at that in comparison to some other sports, and we'll kind of talk about the fact that, like, in sport or in life and in competition and, in anything where we're physically doing something physically demanding, there are risks, and some of them have caused death. There are several risks to exerting your body to this extreme. However, there are also precautions that are taken that reduce that risk significantly that have not been taken historically by CrossFit. And that is where the focus and the problem has been. And I will say this on a smaller scale, and we will talk about, some more or smaller competitions where there are not quite games athletes, but athletes competing, and the swim being just particularly obviously vulnerable. But this is they're not precautions being taken for those level of athletes getting into the water, swimming at night. I mean, me swimming at Wadapalooza, and I said this when I swim there, I'm looking around and seeing, like, no, you don't have anything on your cap to, like, or most people don't even have a cap on. You don't have to have anything on your head. No light, no anything. We're swimming at night. You're swimming with a bunch of people. There's absolutely no way any of those lifeguards on those paddleboards would see if I went down. No way. There's people splashing all over the place.
So this is the shit. So this is why, and this is why when this happened, this is not why my knee-jerk reaction was anger, but this had a personal trigger for me, because I remember thinking about you at Wadapalooza and being extremely anxious when the times were pushed back and pushed back and pushed back for your swim, to the point where it was now dark. Amateur athletes in an open water setting, open water, okay? This is not freaking nighttime in a pool, okay? This is an open water ocean swim. We have amateur athletes. The start times are not staggered, meaning we have a bunch of people all swimming together at once for competition purposes. Okay, people can kick each other. I mean, you can attest to this. What happens in the water is absolutely mayhem,
Yeah.
and it
It's
is
scary.
dark. And I 100% agree with you that in that setting, there is no possible way you have absolutely handicapped the lifeguards, because these athletes do not have any reflective gear. They do not have lights on them. And it is a open water, dark swim. You are not giving any lifeguards any chance to save anyone. And
And everyone is splashing. It almost looks like from my view of just, being in the water or even watching the heats ahead, it looks like everybody's drowning. You know what I mean? Like, there's a ton of splashing that's going on. And, you had brought up a really good point about, like, the lifeguards needing flotation devices. When someone's going down, they're taking you down with you. I've competed there 3 or 4 years, and on my first or second year, there was a girl near me who started absolutely losing it in the water. She started freaking out. She was thrashing. She was grabbing things. I got this far away from her as I could, because, like, this is the survival. Obviously, I'm not a good swimmer either. Her teammates were there with her. But I'm thinking in the same respect, like someone is very panicked in the water in a competition and you have a bunch of people around you. Like, this is a very dangerous situation where
It's so irresponsible.
mhm.
It's so irresponsible, and these are amateur athletes. Now, you can say what you wanna say about professional, athletes at the CrossFit Games and that there is a certain amount of risk involved, and I absolutely agree with you, right? When you're doing anything professionally, we see professional football players having, extreme, lagging effects with concussions. We see race car drivers dying on the track in accidents. Like, there is a level in professional sports where it's like there's a level of risk that's you're signing up for, right? But this shit it starts high in HQ with the lack of concern for athlete safety, and then it levels down all the way down to Wadapalooza, all the way down to local competitions. Because that is the culture, that is the example that's being set, is that like, probably it'll be all right. Everybody here is real fit, and we're with the test is all that matters. The test is all that matters. We're finding the fittest.
And there were just there's been so many different warning signs, and this is why I lean towards the preventable tragedy of this, is because like there's been so many warning signs. For me at Wadapalooza, the heats had to stop because they lost someone in the water.
I remember
She
this.
Yeah.
She wa
So like this happened during my time at competition there. They lost someone in the water. She had been taken out in an ambulance, but the counts were off. She never came back. We in my heat, she had her two other teammates. It was a row, swim, run. So we got on the runner after getting out of the water.
Very similar.
Yes.
Very
And
similar to this one.
because this is a very good again example of what a typical CrossFit workout will look like with a swim involved. And we finished the workout, we finished our heat, and the two girls that were on her team kind of like they finished up their run, but they were like, our teammate never came out of the water. They We have continued, your teammate had never come out of the water. And that's just in my heat. And I just want to bring that up as a point of like, there's warning signs as to we are losing people in certain places in the workout. The swim is an extremely dangerous one. People are unaccounted for, and there's no way that we can really keep them safe with the current guidelines that we have in place, with the current precautions. There's no way we can keep them safe. And there's like, she didn't die, but there were several these are warning signs that happen before something like this, a tragedy, happens. Like, we always talk about on the podcast, was it the shot of tequila or was it 15 beers? Like, there's always these warning signs, and I feel as if the athletes the community is so anchored because all of these were ignored.
All of these were ignored, and unsurprisingly, Wadapalooza has canceled all of their swimming events for the upcoming year. And it's just such a shame. I don't know any better word because it makes me really mad. So I don't uh, just such a shame feels very like under. um but it why does it have to be something like this for you to say, you know what, maybe this year we don't swim? Why does it have to be something like this? Why couldn't it have been, the year where, hey, and that, remember that one heat? And now that's just your heat. How many heats ran that day? Okay. How many times were athletes unaccounted for in the water? How come then you didn't say, you know what? I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like not knowing where an athlete is at every single point in a workout. Maybe we go to a pool if we want to test a swim where we can see straight down to the bottom. People have lanes, meaning no one else can get involved in their swim, and lifeguards have a very easy being a lifeguard's never easy, okay, but
No, but when
lifeguarding in
you
a
have
pool.
assigned people, even if
Like,
you wanna be in an open water, like, you have, like, 5 going at a time or whatever, you have assigned people there that you are staffed to make sure come out of the freaking water. Like, it's just making sure that we're taking proper precautions, and I just wanna say um, there there is a group that has been really championing for athlete safety starting with a couple years ago, at the CrossFit
they
Games
formed, I think, in 2020.
2020. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was during the pandemic and the change of CrossFit. Remember, CrossFit sold, and there was a change in leadership, and this group formed.
The
It with
PFAA. Mhm.
they there was uncertain times with CrossFit, and they felt like, you know what, this is a really important organization to form at this point, so we can ensure that athlete safety is comes above everything else, because all of the previous.
Well, there had been, a workout at the games that was performed Murph. I know many of our, athletes who do CrossFit on a daily basis have performed Murph at some point in their journey at, varying levels. You can do half Murph, quarter Murph, whatever. But the athletes at the games had been doing a Murph with their 20-pound vest, and the heat that they were in. Carol Webb needed to be taken to the ambulance in an ambulance to the hospital because she was physically overheating, like her body was shutting down.
That was so hard to watch. I remember watching that live, and just watching the level of confusion on her face. You know, someone who gets dehydrated and they start to like stagger, and you could tell she didn't know where she was. She was trying to continue the workout despite that. And that was so hard to watch. And everyone watched that and said, oh my God, like, is that safe? Is that like, we want to find the fittest on earth, right? But like, is it appropriate for them to be out there in 100+ index of weather doing that kind of workout after the weekend that they had prior to that? Because it's not a first or only workout, right? Most people do Murph, they recover for a week. I mean, this is like one of many workouts they're doing in a weekend. And it just always comes back to like, we saw this.
Yeah. Well, the thing about that is not that, it's not that the athletes have called for less difficult workouts. They're not trying to
No,
find they're just asking for what had been released was, since the games had moved to Texas, they were asking for the number of workouts that would be performed outside in the heat over the weekend. That's what the PFAA had asked for as a release from the CrossFit Games. CrossFit responded with no. We won't tell you because it's the secrecy of the test. But the problem is that a lot of the athletes who are training in different areas of the world, people come from all over the world, need to be able to prepare for this level of heat index. It's August in Texas. It's very hot. And a lot of these people aren't training under those conditions and just need to be able to prepare and to train in a way that allows them to make sure they're safe and successful. And I think that is also the part where, this kind of steps aside from a traditional sport, where just having a level of preparation for the athletes being appropriate to make sure that they also are keeping themselves safe, because they're under the impression that they are not going to be kept safe by CrossFit HQ.
well, there's no level of secrecy in any other professional sport that I can think of.
No.
You know what you're doing when you go to
No.
run a marathon. You can
Yeah.
look at the weather 10 days out and see, you can look at the weather historically and see in August the temperatures in the area that I'm going to be running this marathon typically range from here to here. I mean,
And you know that that's the span. That's what you're going to be doing outdoors. The difference with CrossFit is you like, oh, obviously could look at the weather and everything, but you don't know the number of workouts that are going to be performed outside. You don't know the length of time that they'll be performed outside. So that's where the variations really come in, to where like we're just trying to get like not releasing the workouts, not being able to practice them, nothing like that, but just a general overall gauge that seems appropriate to athlete safety. And I want to talk about how CrossFit responded for a minute, because there was discussion on canceling the games after after Lazar's death. There was some discussion, and they had decided to continue with with the rest of the weekend. They decided to continue to hold the games and move forward. But during that discussion, um, and I honestly, that like, you can say your opinion whether it should have stopped or continued. It's a really hard one to, kind of like wrap your head around, or like what the athletes would choose, and just like what was the general feel of what we should do next. Um, but several athletes decided that they were going to withdraw from competition, including Lazar's brother, which obviously is not a surprise. How could he continue to compete just on a personal level, losing his brother the day before? Several top athletes, including the champion from last year on the women's side, and the reigning champion on the men's side from last year, both decided to withdraw. Several other athletes decided to withdraw. Um, Several other team athletes had said they would have liked to withdraw, but they also had a responsibility to their team, and they had ultimately decided to together compete in Lazar's memory. What I want to say for everyone who is criticizing athletes' decision to continue to compete or not continue to compete is back it up for 1 second, because that's not the place for blame. There is some space for, this could have been prevented, and there is some like anger and some blame, and I feel like those are totally valid, but it's not at the athletes. Back that shit up for
Back
a
that shit
second.
right up.
That was a very difficult decision for each one of those athletes, whether they decided to withdraw. They had committed more than just this year to competing during that time, and it comes down to this is it for them. But ultimately they decided either they couldn't compete, the emotional toll that they couldn't compete, or they didn't feel that it was appropriate or right. Some athletes felt that the spotlight was on them, the discussion was on them, and it was their job and their responsibility to use that platform while you have all the eyes on you, to draw attention to what happened to Lazar, um, and did that in the best that they could, and that was their way of honoring him. There's so many different aspects. That's not the place that we go around saying you should have withdrawn, you should have kept going. No, 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 no. That's the spectator seats is not where we pick on the athletes who have made that really difficult decision.
First of all, okay, this was their friend. He
Yes.
was extremely well liked. And this isn't like a post death, like, oh, he's the best guy, This was an extremely well liked athlete by press, by all of the other athletes that competed with him. He was the kind of guy that just like absolutely will shoot the shit with anybody. All athletes reported that he was just one of the sweetest and most and kindest competitors that there was in the entire field. And so to say to people that just lost their friend, this is their friend that they know that they've competed alongside for years, that they're not honoring him in the way that you would, first of all, shut the fuck up. No one cares how you would have done it if it was you, okay? You're outside of the arena, stay there. You don't belong in there. What I want to highlight about HQ's decision to continue the games is, first of all, that was a no-win situation. Okay. You've lost an athlete. Okay. There's no right thing to do in that situation. Okay. Continue, don't continue. It all sucks because you've already lost a human being in this competition that people will never see again. His family will never see him again. There is no honoring him with continuing or honoring him with stopping. It doesn't matter.
That was a lose-lose. Yeah.
Lose. But here's where the athletes continued to get resentful of HQ is that after this event, athletes were brought in. This was on a voluntary basis, as I understand it, but everybody showed up to talk about whether or not they wanted to continue. First of all, I appreciate CrossFit for including them in the conversation, but that's kind of where, according to athletes' reports, that it ended, because the decision was made to continue. And the president of the PFAA, which is Brett Fulowski, he went to Dave Castro and said, the games are going to continue. That is totally fine. But what is released to the press regarding this decision needs to not be that this decision was made by the athletes, because that is not it was not a unanimous thing. People did not know how to respond. They did not want to say whether or not they wanted to continue. They wanted to make this choice under their own guise, under their own circumstance, not some freaking weird
Not
vote where we
Yeah,
all
like we can all continue or we can all not.
no, they
Yeah.
didn't want it to be like that. And it was specifically said to HQ, do not phrase this as an athlete decision, because we are not all in agreement, but we will all make our own individual decisions once HQ has decided whether or not the games will continue. And despite that promise from Dave Castro that it would not be released that way, it was released as, 78% of the athletes said they wanted to continue, and that's why we're going to continue. And it just continues to give the athletes that feeling that HQ isn't about them and they aren't here for them, and it's about how it looks. And I understand they are an organization. They have monetary gains and losses behind this as a corporation. So, however, when we look at this from the athlete's standpoint, and that they are going to be then judged by fans and community members of CrossFit based on their decision to stay or go, when CrossFit HQ comes out to the press and says, yeah, I mean, the athletes really wanted to continue, that feels like a real fucking blow, because it's like, wait a minute, I didn't say that. This was your decision, and now you're trying to put it on me that I said, I think it's in his best memory to continue, and that just wasn't the case. And I just feel for them.
For sure, because they were some of them were just crucified. I mean, I didn't have initially have any intention of talking about Tia, who won the games this year, but this was her coming back from having a baby, her first year back, and she had put in one of the videos, she was just with her baby, just thanking people, and the comment, she had to shut off all the comments because she was getting crucified for not honoring Lazar in the way that the fans had thought she should have done with continuing the competition. And it just is like, whoa.
Now understand this, when she came in from the swim, she reported to CrossFit staff before continuing on the workout, Lazar's in trouble out there, and something's wrong. Somebody needs to check on that. Okay.
Yeah.
This is how, thinking of how she must feel now,
Yes.
knowing that she swam by him. These people are
Unimaginable.
friends. They see each other at every competitive event. They train together. They talk to each other. Like, this is a person that she knows and has known for years. Like, there's no room for me. In my
No.
mind, there is no room for anyone outside of the arena to be, saying what she owes him. I mean,
Yeah. Well, and even just, that of like the athletes have stepped aside and said like to an authority member who's supposed to be there, keeping them safe. I told you, like, and now there's a lack of confidence and faith that you are even going to respond when people have brought to your attention that something needs to be done about this. Like, if there was a time the competition would have stopped, it would have been right there. It would have been in that moment. And yeah, so I did want to talk about the third party investigation a little bit too. CrossFit statements initially coming out was saying, this decision was made by the athletes. That wasn't true, and that's not what the athletes had requested. The information be brought out to the public, and shortly after that, CrossFit did make a statement. Saying that there would be a third party investigation into not only what happened, but with recommendations for safety precautions in the future. So, the third party investigation that has been taken place. There's some questions as to the legitimacy of being third party because the organization has ties to CrossFit.
oh, I didn't know this.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
Wow, they promised
to
that this
be
would be an impartial. Wow. Wow.
So that's why, there has been several questions as to how the legitimacy of this investigation is going to take place and the recommendations following. Now, all that I would, you know, really like to highlight in that sense is going like, we all agree this is a such a tragic event and we would like to fix it. Now, we'd like to fix it. A third party investigation, that sounds great. Make sure that it's completely third party and that we're going to take the recommendations based on that to implement into sport going forward, not only at the games, but trickling down into, regionals, into Wadapalooza, into local competitions, that there's a certain level of safety precautions that are just taken from the top down. That if this is like, I know they can't necessarily do, some local competitions because there's different rules for like how some of those, but the
Well, they're
precedent has been
franchised.
set. Yeah,
Yeah.
the precedent has been set. So these are the precautions that we're taking and making sure that the community and the athletes feel comfortable with the third party investigation and feel that it is actually a third party and that the ties to CrossFit aren't just, well, we asked Uncle Jim. He's not a family member, right? He's just Uncle Jim. Like that's how it feels for me. You know what I mean? Like it's not a direct family member. It's just like someone who has ties to it. Like that's not third
No.
party. That's
No,
not from an
that isn't it.
outside source. That isn't it. That isn't
That isn't it.
the response.
And I think uh no one can obviously say right now we have the cause of death of drowning, but there is an autopsy because it seems very unlikely that a 10-year professional or collegiate polo player is going to drown in an 800-meter swim without some other circumstance. We know that he wasn't caught in any netting or reeds, or that wasn't, you can see from the live feed above that it was clearly he was struggling, and we may see that it was a cardiac event that because again, this is not an amateur athlete, this isn't a leg cramp and we're going down, right? These people understand how to keep themselves safe in the water unless there's an extenuating circumstance that is something that extreme. Now if that's the case, well, again, what are the precautionary if we have appropriate measures in place where he is rescued immediately, where we have on-site teams not being called, I'm talking about on-site teams with ambulances, with you go to a local kids basketball game and it's expected that there's a defibrillator there because what if there's a cardiac event, right? And like, this is the basic shit we're talking about here. This is why this gets me so fired up, because this seems as if it was so preventable. And even if it wasn't, let's say this is a massive cardiac event that he would not be able to be brought back from with all the precautionary measures in place. Well, then we say, fucking, shit happens, life is short, nothing can be taken for granted. This is so unfortunate and we will so miss him. And that is a different conversation, I think, from the athlete's perspective, from the fans' perspective, from the community perspective of sport is dangerous. And we know this, right? Especially at a professional level.
Listen, life is dangerous. Like
Sure.
I keep coming back to some of these things where, like, when we're talking about how dangerous sport is, like, is it more dangerous to live a life where you have prioritized health and you go into competition and that could be dangerous, or you have lived a life where you have not prioritized your health and you can have a heart attack walking down the stairs. So the thing
I mean,
is
people
that
die of heart attacks every single day.
every single day.
I mean, this just needs to be kept in perspective. It's just that, watching someone suffer for multiple minutes, potentially experiencing a cardiac event in front of hundreds or thousands of people
Yes.
with no action being that's I, because
Yeah.
no, it's not the,
It's not that we're going to stop sport. It's not that we're
no,
going to live in a glass box, and it's not
no.
that that would be any part of any suggestion that I would make on this podcast. But what I want to say is, like, there is a level of negligence. There is a possibility that he could have gone into cardiac arrest in the water, and no matter what precautions were being taken, he couldn't have been saved. That's also a possibility for sure, but we'll never know. And the problem is that we'll never know.
That's a
But
problem.
I
That's
wanted
a
to
problem.
look at some of the data from some other sports just to kind of put this into perspective, because I think that when we started this discussion surrounding the death of Lazar, there was a lot of comments being like, "That's why triathlon athletes don't swim, or they swim first," and like just there's no death with triathlons. That's what a lot of the comments I was seeing, and I just want to talk about that misinformation for a bit, because that's not true. Um, I will say that I don't know the safety precautions that are being taken at um,
Like
marathons or
Ironmans.
triathlons and stuff like that. But I
Mhm.
do know that I always see medical staff on. I've gone to several marathons because I like to just cry when people cross the finish line.
It's a
I
good
don't
place for a
run
good
them.
cry.
Yeah, if
It's
you
a
don't cry
good
at
place
the yeah,
for a
when
cry.
people cross you just total strangers and you're just like, "I'm so proud of you right
I'm just
now."
so proud of you.
I can't.
That's my
Um,
favorite kind of cry.
it is.
Yeah.
So I just want to address some of that misinformation, because the data is out there and these deaths do happen. Um, at those events. Like, people aren't dying in droves, but just on a general sense, the number of deaths shown, I think, in the last 10 years per 100,000 competitors is 1.74 for triathlon athletes. So per 100,000 competitors, there is, these are, there's no like 1.74 people. Obviously, we're taking that into sometimes it's two, sometimes there's more, but these deaths are absolutely happening. And
73% during the swim.
yes, yes.
73% of the deaths in the last 10 years of triathlons have been during the swim.
Hmm.
This is by far the most dangerous event in any fitness competition. When you get people in the water,
Yes.
the level of risk just increases
Significant.
immensely.
Yeah.
And you know there's been some people blaming the programming, and for me personally, that isn't it. It's not, well, you should have put the swim first. There's a number of safety concerns with putting the swim first. First of all, everyone's getting in the water at the same time, which is a huge safety concern because there is way too much, like, as you said, there's way too much panic and there's not enough space in between competitors. And and the fact is, I do not think in this case we had a programming problem. I think that was an appropriate workout for the level of athlete that it was programmed for. I think the conditions, CrossFit hasn't been known for the greatest conditions. We've had games where athletes have gotten E. coli from swimming, from the swim event. Okay. So they don't have the great, but in this case, we have a fairly early morning event. The heat was not so great yet. And this isn't an open water swim in the ocean where there's stormy weather. Okay. This is a lake. For the most part, this was a, on paper, safe WOD. But without the proper safety conditions and personnel, nothing is safe.
No, and I think that's a great point that you brought up when it comes to athletes getting E. coli from some different things. This happened at the Olympics. There was significant concerns this year with the water that the athletes were asked to swim in France. Days before, tested at levels that were not safe to enter the water. Now, a body of water that big, days before, is testing at levels that is not safe for athletes to enter. How are we going to do that in 2 days? I'm there, and obviously this has been a international concern as far as the Olympics goes because France had spent billions of dollars to try to make the conditions for the water safe enough for the athletes to swim in. And at some point, we kind of have decided, and I just think that CrossFit's an example of this in many ways, that the athlete's safety during competition will be compromised if it's in the name of the event. You want them to swim in the river? We want to see them swim in the river. That's such a cool place to do it. The water's not safe to swim in. The water's not safe to swim in. That's
Do
like
we
it's a full
not have
stop. Like put them
access
in the
to a
pool.
pool? Put them in the
Yeah.
pool. And yeah, it's real cool to see them do an open water swim. Well, who the freaking hell cares about that if you have something like this happen? And yeah, most of the time you don't. And so you keep lucking out and you keep lucking out, but
Yeah.
one day you don't. And I feel that the athletes holding HQ responsible for the years of which they have felt that they have been negligent on the safety concerns of athletes, the number of letters that they've wrote, the
Well, they
number of
created
times,
an advisory committee.
which has never been accepted by CrossFit. They have never accepted this committee into CrossFit HQ to be a part of the decisions that happen surrounding, because it's the secrecy, because we
And
can't let them know what the workouts are.
And the committee has been very forthcoming in the sense of if they're continuing to compete or if they are, that they don't need to know the exact workouts. They would like to advise on some of the concerns that they've brought up in the past. So CrossFit's been around for a long time, and we've learned a lot of things. And doing things like releasing the number of workouts that will be performed outside in these heat conditions is one of the things they brought to they don't want to know the workouts. They want to know the number of workouts will be performed, the length of time athletes will be put in a specific environment that is dangerous for a lot of athletes. That seems appropriate to me.
That
Like
seems more
that seems
than appropriate. We're not talking
yeah.
about, I think it was the president of the PFAA who said, like, we're not talking about wanting to do burpees in a bubble wrap here. We're talking about the basic safety concerns. Just letting us in, and it doesn't even have to be athletes. It can be, this committee working within HQ to say, like, okay, if you want to program this, that's fine. Here are my recommendations for what time of day this would be, where this would take place. Like this is just basic shit. And I can't understand the refusal on HQ's part to have any part in this. And now, you know what? Now the demands that are being made are going to be listened to. And the three most recent demands that the PFAA has come out with have really also shook the community up, because one of them is the demand for the removal of Dave Castro. And that's kind of breaking news. This just came out. The three demands are an appropriate level of transparency between CrossFit and the PFAA regarding their third party investigation to Lazar's death, and subsequent changes made to protect all athletes moving forward. All very reasonable. Two, we demand CrossFit create an independent safety team with the PFAA on an ongoing basis. So they are going to act as liaisons with CrossFit regarding,
To
and
advise.
this is an independent safety team. That's not asking too much. And third and last is that they are demanding Dave Castro be removed from his position on the sports team. And the reason for that, I think, is getting personal because of that miscommunication. I don't know if you want to say, or whatever, with the athlete saying, we don't want this being represented as our decision, and him going ahead and doing that anyways. And then years and years of athletes feeling as if their concerns and their questions were being silenced by Dave Castro in the spirit of finding the fittest and the tests being the most important, and this, and the secrecy, and this is kind of his MO. And I'm not going to
It
say that
is.
this is on Castro. Obviously, I cannot imagine how devastating it must be to program a workout and have an athlete die in a workout that you've programmed and set up. And I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
However, the athlete saying that this has been a consistent theme with him is not, that's not a falsity.
No, I don't believe that's a falsity either, but I do believe this is only Kelsey's personal take on this. Um, I believe this is a checks and balance system. I don't think that this is a Dave Castro issue. I believe this is a checks and balance system. I believe that the workout was appropriately programmed, and there should be a level of, I program these workouts and they are designed to find the fittest on earth. Now, the safety team comes in and says, like, okay, according to these workouts, uh, in the heat index and these other variables, we are allowed to do this, or we need to put these other things in place to keep the athletes safe. Those are the things that happen surrounding still the goal of finding the fittest on earth. It's still there. It's still front and center. But the safety for the athletes is going to, essentially, if something needs to be cut, it oversteps finding the you know the
Checks
need
and
for that
balances.
programming. It's a checks and balance system,
uh,
and it says, like, we can't do that because we can't have appropriate staffing, or the weather conditions are not appropriate, or that those come in. It's just like saying, like, you have to stop the concert because there's a lightning strike. You got to wait 30 minutes. That's not up to the performers. It's just a safety precaution that's put in place to keep the masses safe and to keep everyone safe. That's what needs to happen.
That's what's been needing to happen. And I think that's why the athletes are so frustrated, because they've been petitioning for this for years, since the founding of this athlete association. In 2020, they've been asking very consistently for just this basic checks and balances system of, hey, cool, fittest on earth, love it. The tests, love them. We want to rise to this occasion. We want to be named the fittest on earth by doing, the most amazing feats of fitness. However, ain't nobody need to die doing it. Okay. This isn't a war, it's a sport. And I think that the removal of Dave Castro is sort of a showing by the athletes. So that demand by the athletes is sort of trying to show that one person cannot be the face of this sport without a checks and balance system. And I think that's the way they felt for years, as if it's just kind of like what Dave wants and what Dave programs, and and that comes above all else. And he does not have a checks and balance system. Now, I don't know that. I'm not in CrossFit HQ, but I do feel that that is the impression that the athletes are giving, is that he in particular has not been part of any checks and balances, and has been kind of running rampant with his wants and desires for the athletes, and that not being checked. And I think that's legit.
I do too, but I do think there is a CEO at the top of that that needed to put that checks and balance system in place,
Same,
and and had to have that come, okay, this is how we're going to run it, and have everything ripple off of that.
same. I couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, it's so tough. It's so tough because now that this has happened, it's like we all can go backwards and say, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? But really, um, the people at the top, the CEO, and the owner, these are the people that forever were responsible for every single part of the games, being sponsorship, being putting on a good show, being finding the fittest on earth, and being athlete safety. All of those things had to be, and it just seems as if we now found out that some of those things were taking a much bigger priority. I didn't just find out. I mean, I've done competitions next to amateur scaled athletes finding a 1 rep max 2 feet from where I'm finding a 1 rep max. I mean, this has just been in the community values for far too long, that like probably nothing will go wrong. And this is why over the
It's a
years I've moved.
developmental of a sport. It's a development of a sport, though, because if you look at some of the things, so like sport historically, when sports have started, and you say like those things are not that safe, we're going to make some adjustments there,
Maybe
and
we
that's why I
should
would
wear
talk about
helmets for the
maybe we should
football.
wear helmets. Yeah, exactly. Like these things have happened, and I think CrossFit is so young in a sense of like there has been so many other sports that have been around so much longer, and CrossFit has grown at an exponential rate, and there has been a lot of change that has happened, but we have to learn as we go. And that's why I think like there is some grace there, because when you look at any other sport with the history of its sport, there has been so much evolution to keep the athletes safe. Whether it's been changes to the rules in football, like where you can hit people, and
Yeah,
the adding in pads or adding in helmets, like this has happened, but we have to be able to learn from it and move forward. What I don't want people to take from this is that CrossFit is dangerous. That's one of those things, like when you're going to the gym every day, that's this has been kind of a forefront for me throughout my pregnancy, because people are like, "Well, are you going to continue to CrossFit?" Of course, I'm going to continue to CrossFit. I am a very healthy person because I CrossFit on a daily basis, and that has been extremely beneficial for me throughout my pregnancy. Do I have to modify things just like everybody else when you go to the gym or when you have a change in your life? Of course you do. That these are things that you take into account when you just do any type of exercise. Think about runners. Think any type of thing that you do on a daily basis has some level of risk to it, that we need to make sure we're taking our own safety precautions in place. And when it comes to the safety precautions from the top down, that we're making sure that that is at the forefront when we're talking about sport. We're talking about
that's
sport
true.
in
It's
general.
different. Who
Yes,
these
those are
people
2 different.
are and what they are doing compared to who somebody is that's 49, a grandma, and headed to CrossFit today to get in a great workout so she can combat a history of family diabetes. Listen, okay, those are two extremely different things, but you also need to understand that there is and always has been great CrossFit gyms and subpar CrossFit gyms. And that is why I personally do not recommend it across the board, because I say, like, you need to find your good place, right? If you were going, I say, is CrossFit 100% safe during pregnancy? Absolutely. If you were going to a place where you had any kind of leadership that was pressuring you into doing anything that you felt was unsafe, it's a problem. Okay. And that is why, we
And
can't.
my experience has been like the total opposite. Like I've been like, no, no, I'm still doing this part. Like I'm still good. Like coming around and just being like, hey girl, like, did you want to bike instead of run today? And I'm like, no, no, I'm still running. Like I still feel pretty good. Okay, cool. Make sure you take it, like, your breaks, like blah blah blah. Like, you know what I mean? Like constantly checking in with me, not only throughout the workout, just coming around, how you doing? Like, I'm
And
still good.
that's the community that I love. That's the community they love. That's the community I fell in love with. That is the community I will, defend to the ground. Is I believe in this as a workout methodology. I love the community. I think that it is an incredible, incredible methodology for average people to take into their lives, to be fitter, to be healthier, to be stronger, and to live longer. And that is why it's so hard when things like this happen, because it tarnishes that messaging. And I hate it. I hate the tarnishing of the fact that, if HQ doesn't have their shit together, that, somebody might decide not to try that amazing CrossFit gym today because, you heard about that guy that died at the games. It's like, that's the shit that
That's the shit that
continues to frustrate me
that
about
continues to frustrate.
HQ.
Yeah, that continues to frustrate me too, because you think about this situation in a totally other sense, where you're like, oh, you could just go to a global gym and that's safer to be doing something like, completely independently, when you're like, okay, but, or you could go, with your people and with your community, and there's something like toast to bar, and I'll say like, well, I still can't. It's like, why? What, like my coaches will be like, it's not necessary though. We can get the stimulus from doing some kettlebell swings, or we can get the stimulus from doing, and just kind of like come in with other ideas of like, hey, I know that you still want to work core, but like some of the jumping things, like just not it. So like we can do like rotating like wall ball throws. Like I think that would be a really good thing for just coming up with other suggestions and ways to keep you like happy and healthy and moving is everything. It's in everything. It's all of the support that we're like looking for in our fitness journey. And it really does break my heart that when these things happen, it just comes with this like big dark clouds that you don't get. People don't aren't allowed to get that type of support and that type of community that I know is so amazing.
So, I want to leave you with, we're going to put Lazar's, his GoFundMe in the show notes. Okay. I want you guys to be able to feel as if you can make a contribution in the face of this tragedy. It's always incredibly helpful to families to not have that concern. So if you can, please do. And I also want to leave you guys, with the fact that ultimately what we had here was a person who lost their life and is not coming back. And although that is a commonplace event every day on earth, we really wanted to just try to honor his memory the best that we possibly could, with protecting athletes moving forward, so that this kind of tragedy does not have to befall another family, another fiance, another brother in this way, because we owe this. We owe this to people who have given their life to this sport, and any sport. We owe them the safety of knowing that they can go out there and give everything. And if they get in trouble, that we will help them. And I just hope that we leave the community with that kind. Our hearts are broken,
Mhm. Yeah.
and our hearts are broken for the entire community as a whole, because we all
Mhm.
just feel this so hard. And it couldn't have happened to a nicer person, but we just want to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone ever again.
Yeah, for sure. And just, you know, take it easy on the athletes because their hearts are broken just like yours and they want answers and they want change and they also need to have space to grieve their friend. So it's a hard one. But hopefully you guys are now informed on what happened and we'll definitely have that in the show notes if you are able and feeling willing. And we love you guys. We'll see you next week.